The Prince of Los Cocuyos, The First Real San-Giving Day, by Richard Blanco. November came around and my teacher, Mrs. Echevarria, handed out some ditto sheets to color for Thanksgiving. The pilgrims' tall hats I colored black, the buckles on their shoes gold, the cornucopias of squash and pumpkins, all kinds of oranges and yellows, the huge turkey and amber brown, a turkey, not a pork roast like my family always had for Thanksgiving. As we colored, Miss Echevarria narrated the story of the first Thanksgiving, enthusiastically acting it out as if she had been there. Then the chief of the Indians told Pilgrim John, "We make big feast for you." And Pilgrim John said, "Yes, let us give thanks for our new friends, and for this new land where we are free." My teacher seemed to understand Thanksgiving like a true American, even though she was Cuban also. Maybe, I thought, if I convince Abuela to have a real Thanksgiving, she and the whole family will finally understand too. With new resolve and colored dittos in hand, I approached Abuela that night as she sat at the kitchen table sorting through receipts and making a tally of her expenses. "Abuela, do you know what Thanksgiving is really all about? What it really means?" "Que?" she said, without looking up from her notebook. "Thanksgiving," I repeated. She looked up at me blankly, and I realized she couldn't understand Thanksgiving in my properly pronounced English. So I blurted it out the way most Cubans pronounced it, as if it were the name of a saint. "San-Giving, Abuela, San-Giving." "Oh, el dia de San-Giving, yes, what?" she asked, and I began explaining. It was because the Pilgrims and Indians became friends. The Pilgrims made a big dinner to celebrate and give thanks to God because they were in the land of the free and living in the United States. "What are Pilgrims? And those black sombreros?" she asked, looking over my dittos. "We didn't wear those in Cuba." It seemed hopeless, but I insisted. "Mira, Abuela, mira," I continued, pointing at the dittos again. "They had turkey on Thanksgiving, not carne puerco and plantanos." "We are Americanos like them now in the United States. We have to eat like Americans, Abuela, or else they'll send you back to Cuba." "Ay, mijo," she said with a laugh. "We're not Americanos, but no one is sending us back. We'll go on our own when that idiota Castro is dead, and not 1 second before." "But Abuela, I don't want to go back. I'm American. I want to have a real San-Giving this year. Like this," I demanded, holding up the ditto. "You, Americano? Ha! You're Cubano, even though you weren't born in Cuba." She chuckled. "And what is that food in those pictures? I never saw a chicken that big." "That's not a chicken, Abuela, it's a turkey. Please, I'll help you cook," I pleaded, but she kept resisting. I had no choice but to resort to coercion. I told her I wouldn't go buy specials for her anymore at Liberty Mart, the big American supermarket. "If we aren't going to be Americanos, then why should we shop there?" I said. She took a long pause and looked over the dittos again before replying, "Bueno, let me think about it." She slept on it for 2 days before making a decision. "Maybe you're right, mijo. Maybe we'll try San-Giving how you say," she conceded, with one condition. "But I will make carne puerco too, just in case." It was settled. That Thanksgiving we would have turkey as well as pork. I was ecstatic, but the pressure was on. I knew I wanted us all to have a real American Thanksgiving, but how? Abuela certainly didn't know, and the dittos weren't enough to go by. I didn't know as much about Thanksgiving as I thought I did. I needed help. That week, Miss Echevarria had us make turkeys out of paper plates and construction paper. Surely she would know how to prepare a real Thanksgiving dinner, I thought, and so I asked her all about it. I know, she told me. My husband's mother does all the cooking for Thanksgiving. His mother is an Americana, thank goodness. I couldn't even boil an egg. Great. The next day at recess, I asked some of the American kids in class what they had for Thanksgiving. Turkey, what else, dummy? With stuffing, Jimmy Dawson told me. What's stuffing? I asked. He burst out laughing, thinking I was kidding. It's the stuff you put in the turkey, he tried to explain. Oh, you mean like candy in a piñata? I proposed. No, dummy, with bread and celery and other stuff, that's why they call it stuffing, he tried to clarify. Oh, okay. I pretended to understand exactly what he meant. Nancy Myers told me her mother always made pumpkin pie. Pumpkin? Like in Halloween? I asked, bewildered. Patrick Pilkington said his favorite dish was candied yams. Candied? With marshmallows like hot chocolate? On yams? I asked him. They each described the dishes as best they could, but when I asked them how to make them, they couldn't explain. I don't know, Jimmy said and shrugged. My grandmother makes everything. Great. Given all the fuss I had made the week before, Abuela knew something was amiss when I hadn't mentioned anything else about Thanksgiving. Mijo, ¿qué pasó with Thanksgiving? She asked. There's only 5 days left. I have to start cooking, no? Abuela, I whined, I don't know what to buy or how to make anything. What are we going to do? No worry, we can have pork and black beans like we always have. Maybe some cubaroni? That's Americano enough, no? She said, genuinely trying to appease me. I guess so, Abuela, but it's not the same, I said. Espera a minute, she said, and darted to her bedroom. She returned with that week's Liberty Mart flyer. Mira, look, this will help, mijo. It was a special flyer with pictures like the ones on my dittos, and full of Thanksgiving Day items on sale, including turkeys and something called stuffing in a box, which immediately caught my attention. Could it be true? Could Thanksgiving dinner be as easy to make as instant mashed potatoes and macaroni and cheese? With the flyer as my guide, I made a list and Abuela calculated the cost to the penny. $27.35 plus tax. She gave me $30 and off I went on my bike to Liberty Mart, hoping Thanksgiving would be as easy and tasty as spray cheese from a can. My favorite. The store was more crowded than I had ever seen it before. I roamed around for a while looking for stuffing, but it wasn't listed on any of the signs above the aisles. I noticed a lady wearing culottes and a fancy pendant necklace, just like Mrs. Brady from the Brady Bunch. Surely she was American, I thought. Surely she would know all about making a Thanksgiving meal. I worked up the nerve to ask her where I could find the stuffing, pointing to the picture of it on the flyer. Well, how sweet. You're helping your mother fix Thanksgiving dinner? She asked as if I were 3 years old. Yes, I said, seizing the opportunity, but I don't know where to find anything. Oh, don't worry, honey, she continued. Just go to the end of aisle 8. They have everything you'll need, Pumpkin. Did she call me Pumpkin? Why? Or did she mean they had pumpkin pie there? I was confused. Really? Even pumpkin pie? I asked. Oh, I don't know, honey. I always buy the frozen ones. It's so much easier than making one from scratch, she offered. Frozen pumpkin pie? Could it be that easy? Just as Mrs. Brady said, I found everything in the special Thanksgiving display at the end of aisle 8, including the stuffing in a box. I read the instructions on the box. Boil 1 to 1.5 cups water and 1/4 cup margarine in a medium saucepan. Stir in contents of stuffing mix pouch. Cover. Remove from heat. Let stand 5 minutes. Fluff with fork. Just as I had hoped, easy as mashed potatoes. Abuela's saying, "Como inventan los americanos," rang truer than ever to me then. There were also cans of yams at the display, alongside bags of tiny marshmallows, just as Patrick Pilkington had told me. What he didn't tell me or didn't know was that the instructions for candied yams were right on the marshmallow bag. Put mashed yams in casserole. Mix together margarine, cinnamon, brown sugar, and honey. Top with miniature marshmallows. Bake at 325 degrees until heated through and marshmallows are bubbly. Even Abuela could make that once I translated for her. There were also cans of something called cranberry jelly piled up high. Jelly in a can? I wondered. None of the American kids had mentioned that, but I saw other customers tossing 1 or 2 cans into their carts. I followed suit, figuring it was important for something. All I needed was the turkey. Will Abuela know how to cook something that enormous? I worried, staring at the case full of frozen turkeys. Sure, the turkeys on the dittos had looked big, but these were 3, 4, 5 times the size of a chicken. Would Abuela freak out? But I noticed the turkeys also had cooking instructions printed right on the wrapper. I read them over and discovered the turkey had a timer that would pop up when it was done. Como inventan los americanos? The instructions also recommended 3/4 of a pound per person, so I started counting relatives and family friends, who we considered relatives anyway, blood or no blood, Tio Mauricio and my bratty cousins Margot and Adolfo, Tias Mirta, Ophelia, and Susana, my godparents, Tios Berto, Pepe, and Regino, the mechanic, Minervino, and his wife. Altogether, about 20-something guests, I estimated, and figured I needed at least a 20-pounder. There was no way I could carry it on my bike all the way home with the rest of the groceries. I'd have to come back just for the turkey. Considering the number of guests, I went back to the display and got 2 more boxes of stuffing, 6 cans of yams, 4 bags of marshmallows, and 3 cans of cranberry jelly, whatever that was for. And then I picked up a frozen pumpkin pie like Mrs. Brady had suggested. Proud as a pilgrim in 1621, I floated down the aisles with my loaded cart, ready for my first real Thanksgiving. When I got home, I set the bags down on the kitchen table and explained to Abuela that the turkey was too big and I needed to go back right away. "Pero how are you going to carry it?" she asked, concerned. "Your abuelo can't take you. He's at a baseball game with Caco. You'll have to wait until mañana." But I didn't want to wait until the next day. What if they ran out of turkeys? I told Abuela I'd tie the turkey to the handlebars on my bike. She thought it over for a moment, then handed me a piece of twine from the kitchen drawer where she kept twist ties, matches, and birthday candles. I hopped back on my bike, darted to Liberty Mart, got my bird, and tied all 21 pounds of it across the breast onto my handlebars. But getting it home wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. When I rode over the pothole in front of St. Brendan's Rectory, like I always did for the heck of it, one of the knots slipped and the frozen turkey slid like a shuffleboard puck down the sidewalk and into the gutter before stopping inches away from the catch drain. No problem, I thought. It was frozen and sealed in plastic. I picked it up and tied it even tighter with a few extra knots. But while I was cutting through a parking lot, it fell again and skidded under a huge 4-door sedan. I crouched down and tried to grab it, but it was just out of my arm's reach. Finally, I squirmed under the car on my belly and yanked it back, the turkey and me emerging grimy and blotched with oil. By then, the sweaty condensation on the bird made it impossible to tie to the handlebars. I took off my t-shirt, wrapped it around the turkey like I was swaddling a baby, and retied it for a third time, thinking that would do the trick. Not so. Crossing 87th Avenue, it came loose again. I swerved to avoid running it over and fell off my bike. There we were, me and a 21-pound turkey, lying on the pavement in the middle of a 4-lane road just as the traffic light turned green and cars began honking incessantly. Surely the Indians and Pilgrims must have had an easier time, I thought. With one hand on the handlebar and the other barely able to carry the turkey, I managed to inch my way over to the sidewalk. "That's it!" I yelled at the bird. I tied it to the bike seat and walked my bike the rest of the way. Once home, I washed off the scuff marks and grime with the garden hose before presenting the turkey to Abuela. There was a tear in the plastic seal, but the turkey was still frozen and intact. "Que grande, que lindo," Abuela praised it, none the wiser, and made room for it in the freezer. Mama poked around and snooped inside the grocery bags. "What's all this for?" she asked Abuela, who looked at me to answer her. "We're gonna have a real Thanksgiving this year, Mama. Abuela's going to make a turkey and yams and everything," I explained. "Como? Turkey? Nobody knows how to make that. Especially not your Abuela. She can't even cook Cuban food too good," she jabbed. "Don't worry," Abuela said, trying to remain calm. "You just sit down and relax like you always do. Ricky is helping me, and he knows what he's doing." "Bueno," Mama replied. "I don't know. You better cook something else, too. Some carne puerco just in case." See, whatever," Abuela said, just as the bird slipped through her hands. It slid across the terrazzo floor, bounced down the single step from the kitchen into the Florida sunroom, and knocked into the TV. It lay there, mocking us, mocking me, basking in the sunlight, enjoying the breeze whispering through the jalousie windows, and the view of the backyard mango tree framed by the sliding glass door. Early on Thanksgiving morning, Abuela told me to put the turkey outside. "That's the best way to defreeze it," she said with authority. I put the turkey in a baking pan and placed it in the middle of the backyard terrace where the sun could shine on it all day, and Abuela faithfully followed all my instructions as I translated them to her, without adding any additional ingredients of her own. No saffron, no garlic, no cumin. By 2 o'clock, the yams were ready for the marshmallow topping, and we had finished a pot of stuffing in a box. Como? Why? Where? Abuela asked, as bewildered by the concept of stuffing as I was, despite Jimmy Dawson's explanation, which I parroted to her. Yes, Abuela, inside. That's why they call it stuffing. We stuffed the bird and put it in the oven alongside Abuela's just-in-case pork shoulder, which she had marinated overnight with bitter orange and garlic mojito. Wafts of roasting turkey, wafts of roasting pork. The competing scents battled through the house while I helped Papa and Abuelo set up folding domino tables on both ends of our dining table. We assembled a mishmash of desk chairs, beach chairs, and stools stretching from the kitchen into the living room to seat all 22 relatives. I spent the rest of the afternoon making construction paper turkeys like Mrs. Echevarria had taught us in class. I placed one at each setting, then drew pumpkins all over the paper tablecloth and cut into its edges to make a frilly trim. Abuela added a bouquet of gladiolas, which didn't fit the theme but made the table look better, despite the plastic plates and utensils. Ay, Dios mío, come over here, Abuela yelled for me. What is that blue thing? She asked, alarmed by the pop-up timer in the turkey, which she hadn't noticed before, and I had forgotten to point out. Relax, Abuela, it's nothing. It's supposed to pop up when the turkey is cooked, I explained. Really? Como inventan los Americanos? They make everything so easy, she said, relieved, then slid the turkey back into the oven, only to call me over again 20 minutes later. Bueno, the puerco is done. The turkey must be done too. Look at it, she said. Pero Abuela, the blue thing hasn't popped up. We can't take it out, I demanded. Ay, mijo, look at the skin, toasty like the puerca, she insisted, knocking on it with the back of a spoon. It's done, I tell you. Además, it's already 7 o'clock. We have to put the other things in the oven before everyone gets here. Pero Abuela, we can't, I repeated. She ignored my protest. What do you know about cooking? Give me los llames and el pie. I knew it was useless to argue any further, and hoped for the best as I topped the yams with marshmallows and cinnamon, and took the pumpkin pie out of the freezer. The doorbell rang. I told you, she said smugly. Ándale, get the door. It was the Espinosa clan who arrived first. All 3 generations. Tia Mirta with her showgirl hips. Tio Mauricio wearing a tie and jacket, unwilling to accept that his days as a Cuban tycoon were over. Their 2 children, my cousins, with fancy names, Margot and Adolfo, and their grandmother Esmeralda, who was constantly picking food out of her ill-fitting dentures. They burst through the door with kisses, hellos, and happy Thanksgivings. Tia Mirta handed Mama a giant pot she brought with her. Mira, here are the frijoles. I think they are a little salty, pero Mauricio was rushing me, she said. Minutes later, cousin Maria Elena arrived with her hair in curlers and a plastic-wrapped glass pan full of yuca con mojito. Happy Thanksgiving! Then Tio Berto with 4 loaves of Cuban bread under his armpits. Happy Thanksgiving! At first I thought it was Abuela who didn't trust that a purely American meal would satisfy. But when she was totally surprised by Tia Ophelia's golden caramel flan, I knew it wasn't her. It was Mama who must have asked everyone to bring a dish to sabotage Abuela's first attempt at a real Thanksgiving. My suspicion was confirmed when Tia Susana arrived with a platter of fried plantains in a bed of grease-soaked paper towels. Mira, she said to Mama, handing her the platter. Los plantanos that you asked me to bring. I hope they're sweet. Happy Thanksgiving. Oh, you didn't have to bring nothing, pero gracias anyway, Mama said, casually placing her palm against her cheek, a gesture that always gave her away when she was lying. Abuela served the pork roast next to the turkey, pop-up timers still buried in the bird. A Cuban side followed every American side being passed from hand to hand. That sure's a big chicken, Tio Pepe chuckled as he carved into the bird and then the pork. What's this, the innards? He asked when he reached the stuffing. I had to explain the stuffing concept again to all the relatives as he piled generous portions of turkey and pork on everyone's plates. Papa was about to dig in when I insisted we say grace, proudly announcing I would read a special poem I had written as a prayer in Miss Echevarria's class. Dear God, like the Pilgrims and Indians did long ago, we bow our heads and pray so you'll know how thankful we are for this feast today and for all the blessings you send our way. In this home of the brave and land of the free, where happy we shall forever and ever be. Amen. As soon as I finished, Tia Susana asked Tioberto, who then asked Minervino, who then asked Maria Elena, who then asked me what the heck I had just said. None of them understood a single word of my prayer in English. Bueno, ahora en español, por favor, Tio Mauricio requested, and I had to do an impromptu translation of my prayer in Spanish that ended with a resounding amen and a roar of Feliz Thanksgiving, que viva Cuba from the family. Nothing like the dittos. And so the moment of truth was at hand, or rather at mouth, as everyone began eating. Not even a minute later, Mama asked, What's this with canela y merengue on top? So sweet. Are you sure this isn't dessert? Abuela instantly responded to her spurn. They are llames, just like yuca, but orange and sweet. That's all. Just eat. Ay, Dios mío, orange yuca. What about blue beans? Mama laughed, and the rest of the family joined in. They're not like yuca, they're like boniato. It's like what they ate on the first Thanksgiving, I explained. Really? They had marshmallows that long ago? Mama quipped. She saw my face crumple. What else do you know about Thanksgiving, mijo? She asked me, changing her tone and taking an interest. I went on for a few minutes, telling the tale of the Pilgrims and Indians in Spanish, so that everyone could understand. But soon the conversation changed to Tia Mirta's black beans. You make the best frijoles in all Miami, Papa complimented her, and everyone agreed as they poured ladlefuls of black beans over their mashed potatoes like it was gravy. Nothing like the dittos. What's this babaroja for? Abuelo asked me, holding a dish with a log of cranberry jelly. I was embarrassed to admit that I hadn't figured out what it was for. Well, it must be for el pan, Abuelo assumed, and he began spreading cranberry jelly on his slice of Cuban bread, already buttered. Oh, sí. Everyone responded to the solved mystery and followed suit. It was the thing they all seemed to enjoy the most, besides the roasted pork, of course, which Tioberto couldn't stop praising as perfectly seasoned and perfectly tender. He spooned the bottom of the roasting pan and poured pork fat drippings over the lean slices of turkey on his plate. Ahora sí, much better. Not so dry, he proclaimed after a taste, and then proceeded to drench the platter of carved turkey with ladles of pork fat swimming with sautéed onions and bits of garlic. Nothing like the dittos, but at least after that, everyone had seconds of the turkey. After dessert, Abuela made 3 rounds of Cuban coffee. Papa turned on the stereo system and put in Hoy Como Ayer, his favorite 8-track tape with 8 billion songs from their days in Cuba. The crescendo began and Minervino took his butter knife and tapped out a matching beat on his soda can. Before you could say Happy Thanksgiving, there was a conga line 20 Cubans long, circling the domino players around the Florida sunroom. When the conga finished, the line broke up into couples dancing while I sat sulking on the sofa. You can't teach old Cubans new tricks, I thought, watching the shuffle of their feet. There seemed to be no order to their steps, no discernible pattern to the chaos of their swaying hips and jutting shoulders. And yet there was something absolutely perfect and complete, even beautiful about them, dancing as easily as they could talk, walk, breathe. As I began picking up the rhythm, Abuela dashed into the room, twirling a dishcloth above her head and demanding, "Silencio, silencio, por favor." Papa turned down the music, and the crowd froze, waiting for her next words. "Tio Rigoberto just called. He said he heard from Ramoncito that my sister Ileana got out, with the whole familia," she announced, her voice cracking as she wiped her eyes with the dishcloth and continued. "They're in España, waiting to get las visas. In a month, más o menos, they will be here. ¡Qué emoción!" She didn't need to explain much more. It was a journey they all knew, had all taken just a few years before. A journey I didn't know, having arrived in America when I was only 45 days old. But over the years, I had heard the stories they always told in low voices and with teary eyes, reliving the plane lifting above the streets, the palm trees, the rooftops of their homes and country they might never see again, flying to some part of the world they'd never seen before. One suitcase packed mostly with photographs and keepsakes, no more than a few dollars in their pocket, and a whole lot of esperanza. That's what the pilgrims must have felt like, more or less, I imagined. They had left England in search of a new life, too, full of hope and courage, a scary journey ahead of them. Maybe my family didn't know anything about turkey or yams or pumpkin pie, but they were a lot more like the pilgrims than I had realized. The next morning, Abuela made toaster treats and café con leche, but didn't eat, complaining she had had stomach cramps all night long. She said Abuelo was still in bed, nauseated. Mama admitted she threw up before going to sleep, but thought it was the strange stuffing in a box. I had diarrhea, I confessed, as did Papa. Caco claimed he was fine. None of us knew what to make of our upset stomachs until Tia Esmeralda called. She told Abuela she had been throwing up all night and was only then beginning to feel like herself again. She blamed it on those strange llames. Then Tio Regino called and said he'd had to take a dose of his mother's elixir paragorico, which cured anything and everything. He blamed it on the flan, thinking he remembered it tasting a little sour. The phone rang all day long with relatives complaining about their ailments and offering explanations. Some, like Tia Mirta, blamed the cranberry jelly. Others blamed the black beans or the yuca that was too garlicky. And some, like me, dared to blame it on the pork. But surprisingly, no one, not even Abuela, blamed the turkey. In 1968, Richard Blanco was born into a family of Cuban exiles in Spain. Shortly after he was born, the family emigrated to the United States, where they settled in Miami, Florida. While Blanco was passionately creative growing up, he was also excellent at math and science, leading him to become a civil engineer. However, his creativity was not forgotten, and he went on to lead a double life, pursuing writing alongside his civil engineering career. His dedication was met with wide success, including the honor of being chosen to read his poetry at Barack Obama's second presidential inauguration.